Hello, my name's Lydia, and before we get into July's reading journal updates, I thought that would be fun to take you guys along with me while we go on a little field trip. I'm currently at Sun Snow, which is an independently owned stationery shop here in St. Louis, and they also do events, so I'm going to one of their stationery events. I thought that'd be kind of fun to try it out, but before that, I'm going to go explore the store a little bit and see if there's any stationery that catches my eye. Before we get into the journal updates, I thought it would be fun to go over everything I bought at Sun Snow. I got some of this correction tape. I wanted to try it to see if it worked with my journal. I also got a pair of these compact scissors. I thought these would be really nice to take with me when I'm traveling because they do fold down pretty compact. I also picked up this really cute green leaf washi tape. And lastly, they have a little stamp program. So if you buy a certain amount, you get stamps. And I've been there before, so I had enough stamps to get a little sticker. But yeah, that's everything I got at Sun Snow. I'm super excited, especially to use these scissors. I hope they work well. I will probably open them and use them while we do my journal updates for the month of June. For this month, I want to keep it pretty casual and just update the spreads that need to be updated. The video I uploaded last month does go over in detail all of the spreads. It's a full flip through and explanation video. But this time I kind of just want to turn my brain off and work on filling this out and let voiceover me talk about the 10 books that I read during the month of June. The first book I read this month was The One by John Mars. The One takes place in the near future where a company has made a DNA test that can match you to your soulmate. They sell the results to these tests and it basically becomes the new norm. Couples who get together without being matched are kind of seen as lesser compared to matched couples. We follow a total of 5 points of view, each one following a different person who recently received their match. There's a lady whose match is someone in Australia while she lives in the UK. One is a guy who's in a happy relationship but his match is not his partner. There's a lady who hasn't met her match yet but then she finds out that he's dead. One point of view is the scientist who created the test. And by far the most interesting point of view is the serial killer who gets matched with a police officer. This book was a super addictive read, but it's written with such short chapters that the rotating POVs get really frustrating after a while. I feel like it's a common writing technique in thrillers to use super short chapters that always end in cliffhangers in order to keep readers engaged. But in this case, it just made the flow of the story feel really broken up, and I would have liked it more if it had been more concise. As I was filling this out, I realized I accidentally filled out a square for the month of July. So I just need to remember that and not accidentally double fill out for that one. But we will move on to my series tracker. I do have a series that I need to add here. That is the Drifting Classroom series. It's only 3 books for the Perfect Edition, so I will add that into here. The Drifting Classroom by Kazuo Umezu has been on my list for a while now. It's considered something of a classic in the horror manga space, and I bought a copy of the first volume to read for this huge graphic novel vlog that I've been working on. I'm glad I finally got to it. It was super enjoyable, and I'm very intrigued to know where the rest of the series goes. For that vlog, I also read Thornhill by Pam Smee. It's a middle grade haunted house story told between 2 timelines, and wow, it really blew me away. The art was monochromatic and gorgeous, and for the target age range, it is such a dark story. The last graphic novel I read for this project was A Long Tomorrow and Other Science Fiction Stories. This is by Mobius, and he was a super influential French comic artist in the 70s and 80s. Solid art, but like most short story collections, some are really good and some are kind of meh. For the month of June, I did DNF 2 books, and those books were Dark Rise and Cutie Honey. I was also able to cross off the final square in my favorite tropes bingo, which was Death Games. For this square, I'm using The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This is the Hunger Games prequel that follows Coriolanus Snow, and I loved it. I love following horrible characters. I find it to be so fascinating. I do think this book works really well as world building for Panem, and also helps establish how the Hunger Games became the way they were in the original trilogy. I only had one 5-star read for the month of June, and that was Yesteryear by Carol Claire Burke. But I did have quite a few 5-star movies. Those 5-star movies were Everything Everywhere All at Once, Bones and All, Tokyo Godfathers, Love Exposure, and then Luca. Everything Everywhere All at Once and Luca were both rewatches for me, but I like including them in my 5-star spread.
Going back to yesteryear, this is a 2026 release I was super looking forward to, and I'm happy to say it did not disappoint. We follow Natalie, who is a tradwife influencer. One day she wakes up and she's been transported back in time, living the pioneer life she idolized. It's technically a dual timeline between the past and the present, but the pioneer storyline is much less a focus than seeing how Natalie built her social media empire and grew her farm and her family. I would say it's not really a commentary on tradwives, but instead tradwife influencers specifically. Natalie is shown to be this two-faced person who doesn't live by the values she upholds, and the book is really just exploring the world of this horrible person whose life is awful because she refuses to be wrong. I'm someone who's super interested in tradwives and fundamentalist religions, so it was interesting to see someone do a satirical take on the lifestyle. You can see the inspiration it took from both Ballerina Farms and Ruby Frankie. It's been interesting to see how many tradwife books have come out this year or are slated to come out this year. I think it definitely speaks to the greater anxiety we have about our current trajectory as a society, but I've been enjoying them. I'm curious to read more and to see if people start developing this trope in an interesting way.
So I did update my next spread on my own time just because I was so excited that I got to check out 4 different things for my 26 and 2026. Those 4 items were The Drifting Classroom, Gods of Jade and Sorrow, Tokyo Godfather, and then Portrait of a Lady on Fire. For those of you who don't know, my 26 and 2026, I'm doing a combination of books, movies, TV shows, and games. For new releases, I do have Yesteryear that I've read this month, and I can cross that off. And I am also going to cross off Sublimation. It came out at the beginning of June, and so there's been more reviews for the book, and I don't know. From what I've heard, it just doesn't sound like something I'm super interested in anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and cross that off. I did get a total of 2 books read from my physical TBR this month. Those books were A Ballad of Songbird and Snake, so I'm going to go ahead and put a little checkmark sticker next to it. And then the other book is The Drifting Classroom. For the Buzzword Reading Challenge for the month of June, the prompt was 1-word title. And I actually had 2 options I could have picked for this. I could have used Yesteryear or I could have used Thornhill. So I went ahead and chose Thornhill since I feel like I had Yesteryear represented in a few other places throughout my journal. For the cover challenge, the prompt was Wings, and for that one, I chose to read A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I don't have any updates for my horror bingo board this month, but I do have an update for my Watching the Decades challenge. I went a little out of order and watched Dracula's Daughter, which came out in 1936. For my monthly nostalgia reread challenge, I chose to read Ella Enchanted. And for my monthly nonfiction, I read How to Argue with the Meat Eater and Win Every Time by Ed Winters. I did splurge this last month and buy Parasite, which was on sale because the Criterion Collection was having a 50% off sale. For my monthly favorites, since I only had 1 5-star book in the month of June, I chose Yesteryear. For my movie selection, I had so many to choose from, but I ended up picking a first-time watch, which was Love Exposure. I really loved this movie, and it's 4 hours long, but I kind of want to rewatch it. And as for my other category, I have another video game. I started playing Mecha Chameleon since so many other people have been playing it, and it is so fun. I've been having a great time. Filling out my monthly movie stats for the month of June, I watched 40 movies for a total of 72.6 hours. Of those movies, 22 were streamed, 0 were ones I watched that I owned on DVD. 10 of those movies came from the library, 5 came from Canopy/Hoopla, and 3 of those I watched in theaters. I also had 0 DNF for movies during the month of June. For my monthly book stats, I read 10 books for a total of 3,797 pages. 5 of those books were on audio, 3 were print, 2 were ebooks, 2 books I DNF'd. 2 of those books came from my TBR, and then the other 5 came from the library.
I decided to work on checking off another book for my 26 and 2026 list, so I picked up the audiobook of Gods of Jade and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is a book that was put on my radar years ago when I worked at a library. It was like all the rage among my coworkers. I finally got around to it 7 years later, and I have to say, I just don't get it. The story follows Cassiopeia, who lives in her grandfather's house where she is treated like a servant. One day she unlocks a chest her grandfather has been guarding and lets loose a Mayan death god that had been trapped inside of the chest. From there, we follow her and the god on a journey to reclaim his throne and get back his immortality. Now, I understand that the writing style was supposed to mimic oral storytelling traditions, but for me, it just felt juvenile. I think part of the issue was that the characters felt very one-dimensional, and outside of our main character Cassiopeia, all the other characters weren't really fleshed out. It was hard for me to buy into the romance side of it at all, like they had no chemistry. I also think the setting of the Jazz Age in Mexico is like a great idea in theory, but honestly there was no real sense of place throughout this book. It could have been set in any era and it still would have worked because there's like no world building and no reason why it had to be set in the Jazz Age. I'm sad I didn't like this because being Mexican myself, I want there to be more stories based on Mayan mythology. I feel like it's such an untapped well of inspiration. And this is my first time trying out Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and I know she's super well loved. So I will probably give her another chance because I did hear that this was not her typical writing style, so hopefully I'll be able to like a different book by her. After finishing The Gods of Jade and Shadow, I picked up Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine for my nostalgia reread of the month. It was a delight to revisit this story. It's basically a Cinderella retelling, but our heroine Ella has been cursed with obedience by her fairy godmother. It's actually a super dangerous curse, and Ella lives in constant fear of being compelled to do things. We see her stepmother and sisters use it to their advantage, making Ella a servant in their home. And this added aspect to the Cinderella story creates a real driving force for Ella. She wants to break this curse. And I feel like that's just such an interesting take on the story that really elevates it above other retellings. But like any fairy tale, there is also a love story happening between Ella and the prince. I remember enjoying this book a lot as a middle schooler, especially when the two of them are exchanging their letters. 12-year-old me thought that was the height of romance. Now, I mostly just think it was a cute story. I definitely see why this is Levine's most popular work. Just the mechanics of the curse alone are so fascinating, and the fairy tale style world is so charming. I might need to rewatch the movie now, even though I know it's so different from the book. It also has its own charm to it. Now, for my monthly nonfiction read, I picked up the audiobook for How to Argue with a Meat Eater by Ed Winters. This book is basically what the title says, a rebuttal for every argument against veganism. I definitely want to pick up the physical version of this book and do some annotating because this is meant to be more of a guide that you can jump around in and read different sections from based on what questions you have. I like how the information was organized into different archetypes of meat eaters. I've been vegan for 7 years and even I learned some things from this book. Definitely a good resource, but not the most interesting read. But it did make me realize I want to dive more into nonfiction about veganism and check out more documentaries as well. I was really into doing that when I first became vegan, but I want to get back into it.
Okay, I have dug through my stash and I really want to try to use this sticker sheet. I think it's super cute and fun, but it is a little difficult because there are so many like different colors working into here. So I swatched a few things. We're going to see if I can make this work. I did have to pull out my Crayola like washable markers because it's the only one I could find that had like this kind of green. And yeah, we're gonna see if we can make this work. And this is a super big sticker, so I might have to kind of rethink my layout for this month. So bear with me while we get this set up.
And the last book I have to talk about for June is the one volume of Noragami I read. My best friend and I have been buddy reading this series. We read just a volume at a time and then get together to discuss. It's been such a fun time. Noragami is one of those anime series I loved, and getting to relive the story through the manga has been wonderful. We're finally past everything that happens in the anime, so we're getting into new arcs, which I'm really excited for. For those of you unfamiliar with the series, it's about a god named Yato, who's a really unknown god, but is trying to build a name for himself by doing cheap labor and favors for people. There's also a girl named Haiori, who's tied to him because she had a near-death experience and can now leave her body behind to roam around as a spirit. There's a lot of world building and lore for the series that is really deep and interesting to learn about. But honestly, for me, it's the characters that have me hooked. The series has a lot of humor, but also a lot of heart. Like, it feels like one of those rare series where every character is an individual. Once we finish Noragami, we'll have to find another manga series to read together because this has been so fun, and it's just fun to have something to talk about every time we get together.
And that is my July setup. I still want to add some stickers in through here, but I will kind of wait to see how much I read and how much space I have by the end of July to kind of figure out the final layout. I did also want to show off my Pride Month movie challenge tracker fully filled out. I think it turned out really fun, and I think I want to incorporate more trackers like this in the future. Thank you so much for joining me as I updated my reading journal for June. If you have any questions about the supplies I use or things like that, I will be happy to answer them in the comments. And let me know what your favorite read for the month of June was. I absolutely love hearing from you guys, and be sure to like and subscribe as well if you enjoy my content. All right, thank you so much.